If you are in your early to mid 20s, you're coming out of school and you have these big dreams and ambitions of being a high performer or being hyper successful, I sincerely hope that this will help you out. And the first thing is like you have been lied to about 9 to 5 jobs. And I know this from experience because I fell for the lie. So a lot of social media that talks about success, self improvement, business ownership, entrepreneurship, whatever, they talk about how like screwing the 9 to 5, don't get into the rat race. It's for NPCs. If you take a job that somehow you've already failed. And they may a lot of times they don't necessarily directly say that, but that's the belief that they're trying to implant into you through their marketing so that you buy their courses and so that you end up just investing tens of thousands of dollars into what they have. And I fell for this so hard. It smacked me in the face. And for the first year and a half after I had graduated school, my undergrad, I refused to get a 9 to 5 because I thought that if I did, I would be some other brainwashed corporate drone that just settled. Right. But then reality has a funny way of just smacking you in the balls a little bit. And at this time, after about this year and a half had gone by, I still had this crippling student loan debt, and I was making $9 an hour as a front desk person at a gym. And then on the side, I was training personal training clients for about $20 an hour. I was barely covering any of my bills, and I knew I was running out of time. Because the thing about it is, the world doesn't care about your opinions on a 9 to 5 or what your dreams and ambitions are. It just wants its money. Right. So I ended up caving and this weird thing happened. So I got a 9 to 5 and it wasn't because I necessarily wanted to. I just had to because I was on this hamster wheel of hustle for that year and a half after I had graduated school. And at first, like it was terrible. Even though I hated it though, I still could not get a 9 to 5 because somehow my identity was wrapped up in not doing that and going against the grain for the sake of it. And it was 12 hours a days, stress, no time, no escape. And I was bouncing between the home, gym, offsite client training. I was just grinding myself into the ground. And so I knew this had to change. So what I had done is I just started tapping into my network, asking people like, hey, I can't do this anymore. I need money. Right. And so I told everyone that I needed full time work, benefits, I needed real money. And so eventually, what ended up happening was I ended up landing a full time job selling gym memberships at like a premium health and tennis club. And immediately I doubled my income. Like essentially in a 3 week or in a month span, I had went from making $20,000 a year, give or take a few, to making between 45 and $50,000 a year. And if you've ever made any kind of jump like that in your life, you'll know how crazy it feels. And the schedule wasn't ideal because it was Thursday to Monday and I was working weekends, but I was off by 4 o'clock on those weekends if I didn't have any other appointments. And at first, whenever I first started the job, I felt like I had lost, right? Because like I felt like, oh, I'd given up on my entrepreneurial dreams. Like somehow like I had failed, right? Not considering that everybody has different scenarios and life setups that they are born into and that they just, you don't know what you don't know. Right. And then as I started working it, I realized like my life was infinitely better. Everything about my life. And it dawned on me like, yo, like 9 to 5s aren't necessarily a trap. Like they can be a cheat code. And so after a month of doing this, like I felt better. I had less energy or less anxiety. I had more energy and I had more confidence than I had ever had before. And meanwhile, the whole like make money online crowd, they'll say, oh, it's a trap, like it's what keeps you comfortable. But like I experienced the opposite. I all of a sudden had more bandwidth to focus on learning skills, creating more cash flow into my life to actually invest into myself and other skills, and then less stress about my next paycheck and being able to cover my bills. And so at that point, that's whenever I realized like the whole like 9 to 5 or just full time job, even if you're ambitious, and you want to eventually do your own thing, or you want to be a high level executive at a company and just be a leader, like it's not a prison sentence like I had been told it was, and like I had been led to believe by my favorite gurus and influencers. It was leverage. And the people who actually know how to play the game see it in the same way. And so, the right 9 to 5, if you can think about it from this perspective, it's just an opportunity vehicle, because ultimately, like, you being an ambitious person is less about owning your own thing and more about, do you have an opportunity to level up as a professional, regardless of what that is, and to be a higher version of yourself, right? Because most people, what happens is they stay broke because, one, they don't have a desire to push themselves. And I'm going to assume if you're watching this, you probably want to push yourself. You probably want to be better. You're just confused about the direction that you need to go. And a lot of people, they just pick, the wrong game piece, essentially. So the 9 to 5 can be a cheat code for you, but it's only if you come in with that same, leadership mindset or entrepreneurial mindset, whatever you want to call it, and you pick the right opportunity vehicle. And so all you need to do is I realize that you just kind of have to ask yourself, like, is this a company that is run by boomers who love the whole idea of bureaucracy and gatekeeping? Because what I found is that's what most of us are scared of. We're scared of getting into a business where we're just a cog, and whatever we say doesn't have any weight to it, or doesn't mean anything, or nobody's going to listen, right? Or is it like a fast moving startup where performance actually matters? The way that you show up matters. You having an ability to make a genuine impact, and people are actually going to listen to you and let you kind of like just go and work as hard as you can. And does the culture of the place, does it actually reward growth? Or is it just a bunch of the whole like empty teamwork, collaboration BS that's just covering up laziness? And so what we have to learn how to do is differentiate, like, when we think like, oh, we're not going to like a 9 to 5, is it the thing itself, or is it just we just don't want to be in a place where our growth is stunted, and we just don't want to be in a place where we're just a cog, like we're just a number. And that's what I needed to understand about this whole like working environment, right? Is like, it's okay to work a 9 to 5. There's plenty of wealthy people that have just worked 9 to 5s their whole life, but they know the opportunity vehicle they need to go into, and they position themselves accordingly to be the best that they can in that. And so what most people, and I hope that if you are in your early 20s trying to figure a lot of this stuff out, is you just have to understand like where a business is in its life cycle. And so if you land at a company that's growing really fast, you can grow with it, right? So if you pick the right vehicle, a 9 to 5 can accelerate your career and your knowledge and your connections way faster than starting your own thing too early. Because most of the time when it comes to business, we don't know what we don't know when we're that young. And so it could be a benefit to work for a 9 to 5 and just change the perspective of it and just see it as like they are paying you to learn and increase your skill set. But what happens is like we're not taught to think that far ahead. And so we're also given this whole myth of like the whole work-life balance. And this is something that messes people up, because people assume that if they work a 9 to 5, they're all of a sudden they're not going to have balance anymore. Or they're not going to be able to do the things that they want as they could if they were an entrepreneur. But if you're building a business that actually like makes money, you work more than you would in a 9 to 5 anyway. And so a business doesn't stop at 5 p.m. and it doesn't come with healthcare, 401k, guaranteed income, and all that stuff. And when you're in a learning stage in your professional development, the amount of mental bandwidth that you have is dramatically important, and it's going to affect how much you actually learn, right? And especially if you have debt, like I still do, you need a little bit more security so that you can actually learn the things that you need to do to up-level your skills. But the thing is, like, online gurus keep pushing this whole fantasy, right? And they'll show you, the Lambos and the penthouses and the best highlights of their day and the illusion of effortless wealth. Oh, if you just buy my 10K program or you just follow this 10-step method, you're going to make 20K, 30K, 40K a month. But what they don't show you is one, the actual results, the work that they're actually doing, and the fact that most of the success is in the tiniest of details. And it's actually the aggregation of all of those details that ultimately lead to the outsized returns. But they won't show you the real financial stress because it's not sexy. And you probably wouldn't buy into the course if they told you that the probability of you actually getting there is less than 1%, regardless of person. And so they also won't show you the name on the lease, the apartment that they're renting. It could be under their parents' name. And that's how a lot of these young, like under 23, kids that are flexing for you and giving you just short form content or scripted material or whatever, like they're not showing you these things. And it seems like there's a lot more successful gurus like that than there actually are. A lot of it just because of survivorship bias, right? It makes it seem like everybody's making it when it's really less than 0.1% of people that actually are. Meanwhile, there's people that are treating their careers and themselves like the business. And this is how I see me now, is like I am the business and I work for a founder as his head of operations. But, a lot of people are stacking 250 to 500K salaries while avoiding the stress that comes with being a founder and that keeps them awake at night. And so then another argument that'll happen is people will come in, these gurus, and they'll say, yeah, but layoffs and, they could lay you off at any moment. Well, your business could go under at any moment too. And if you're elite at what you do and you provide real value to business and you are good and you've developed a skill set and you know how to communicate that skill set, which is arguably probably more important than the actual skill set you have, and you build relationships and you make yourself valuable, you're not ever going to struggle to find work. Like that's something I've realized over the last about 4 years is every job I have applied to, I am 4 for 4 in terms of sending resume, getting interview, getting the job. Why? Because I know how to communicate my value. I keep track of all my results and I know what I can do. But the people that get hit hardest with those layoffs, they're like, oh, you don't know when they're just going to let you go because that does happen. But the people that happens to are the ones that just clock in and out. They don't go out and they don't try to build relationships with people. They assume the job security is a given instead of something that you create for yourself. And so ultimately these people end up coasting and they just collect a paycheck and they just do the bare minimum. And ultimately that's what a lot of your favorite creators and gurus are doing. They're doing the bare minimum, but they know how to market. And that marketing, which it has so many psychological triggers and psychological manipulation in them, gets you to feel like crap about yourself so that you can then buy their course and so that they can then sell you on this thing and you can feel, at least for a moment, that there's hope. But there's not, because it doesn't ultimately change who you are. Very rarely does it. And so then things typically go sideways for these people that just kind of clock in and out and live their day to day, and then they're left scrambling. But that's not you, because ultimately all of this, regardless of whether you want to be an entrepreneur, whether you want to just be an executive, or hell, maybe you just want to be the best coder, programmer, whatever in your industry, it all just comes down to like, what value code are you going to choose to live by? So if you build real skills and you master your lane, you're never not going to level up. Entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship, 9-to-5s, they're all just vehicles to get to where you want to go. Some have higher upside, sure. But who's to say that you can't use that 9-to-5 to stack skills and build leverage and eventually like launch your own thing 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road whenever you actually know the things that you currently don't know. And so for me, like having just massive amounts of debt and barely being able to pay it, if even at all, crushed my own confidence. But the second that I took a 9-to-5, life got significantly better. I could finally invest in myself. Dating got so much easier. I had more options of things to actually do and less stress. And all of a sudden, I wanted to grind. It made me want to work hard and do things on a daily basis that made me better. Because a 9 to 5, it's not the end and you haven't lost. It can be the beginning of whatever your own personal dynasty is. The only thing that you have to ask yourself though is like, if you do choose to get a 9 to 5, are you still playing to win or are you just doing it and are you stuck in this game of cope? Which is what all of this comes down to. And so if you are in your early 20s, you've graduated school, maybe you're in your mid to late 20s and you're still kind of on this whole like, oh, I need to start a business. I want to push you to consider alternatives, not as a way of failure, but as a way of finding things that you can learn from, right? Because especially if you didn't grow up around entrepreneurs, or maybe you just weren't in a position, you have a lot of other shit you got to pay off. Like maybe a 9 to 5 is great and you actually need to do that and then spend less time in your days focusing on a business for the short term so that you can stack skills for the long term and eventually do your own thing. So, hope this helps. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Peace.